Okay, welcome back guys. So in this tutorial, as you can see on screen, we're going to start with the batch API. It's a API, it's a type of thing that OpenAI provides, in which you can send like a lot of requests in batches, and you could end up paying 50% low cost. The only downside is that you don't get an instant response, and since you don't get an instant response, basically the prices are low. But other than that, if you wanna, if you don't have a problem with the prices, then in that case it's better to go with the regular, streaming API. But batch API would be good when you have like pipelines and stuff that are running. So that's the case. So let's go ahead and start with a little bit of theory. Okay. So as I've said, send asynchronous groups of requests with 50% lower cost. So yeah, you could send a group of requests. I believe the limit is somewhere 50,000. So you cannot send more than you cannot send a file that has more than 50,000 requests. And I believe there's also a limit of 100 MB, 100 megabytes. So if your file should not be larger than that. There's a 24-hour turnaround time. So basically, after after you submit your file to do the batch processing, it should take maximum 24 hours. Sometimes obviously less than that. It would take maximum 24 hours to do all those predictions, to do all the inference, and send the whole file back to you. Right. Next is higher rate limit. So basically, OpenAI has a rate limit on the regular API, streaming API. Basically allow stopping some sort of attacks, like I don't know, if somebody's doing too many requests at a time. If somebody has done, I don't know, 5 million requests in a day or something. So in order to stop those kind of things, and in order to limit the overburdening of their systems, they have limits, and the limits are different for streaming API and batch API. If you are doing batch API, in that case, your limit would be different, and it's going to be higher. So basically, you would be able to send more requests at a time. So that's a benefit you get. So yes, substantially more headroom compared to the synchronous streaming API, right? Fast completion time. So each batch completes at, as I said before, 24 hours, and often more quickly. In here, this API, it's going to support text and vision, both of them as an input. However, as for the output, it would probably be just the text, and I believe they also have embeddings, so you can also have embedding models do this thing, and this would be helpful in RAGs. If you are building RAGs, retrieval augmented generation, then in that case, streaming in that case embedding could help you, and if you have a batch, then that's even better, right? So because of this thing, you might not be able to use some of their nuanced models, for example, text to speech, and like those kind of models, because they only support text at the moment. And it can also, as you can see, it can also work with fine-tuned models. So the models that you have built in our previous sessions, you could use the same model, right? Next. When do you want to use batch API? Obviously, when you want to run evaluations. In this case, if your data is in batch, if you want to run so many requests at a time, then in that case, it's better to go with batch API. If you have a large data set and you want to do some sort of classification or maybe sentiment analysis or anything, so in that case, you can use batch API. Obviously, streaming API would be something that you can use for experimentation. But when you have a large data set of 10,000 items or 20,000 items, then in that case, it's better to go with the batch API. Embedding content repositories. So in this case, if you want to generate embedding at large scale, then in that case, you could go with batch API as well. Cool. This is how a single request looks like, and you can have as many requests as you want. Obviously, less than 50,000. But each of their requests would look something like this in their in your database, the data file, basically, right? So as you can see, it would have a custom ID, and this would be an ID or a kind of an index per record. So here it says request 1. For your second record, it would be request 2, and third record request 3, and likewise it would go. Method here, it would remain post. The URL is completion model. So if you're using their chat models, completion text models, then in that case, the URL would be this. In here in body, you would specify the type of model you want, And here in the messages, this is our regular area in which we have our messages, the whole content. We have a system level prompt, user level prompt. You can have assistant level prompt, and you can give the whole thing to them to do the batch processing. And max token and other things, temperature and stuff, you can specify it here as well. And that would complete our one single record. And yeah, in your data or in your file, you would have multiple of these, right? Now let's see this thing on their official page. This is the official documentation. As you can see, you can read more about the rate limits on this place. Obviously, the rate limits of the streaming API, and as it's different for the batch API. We have already talked about this thing, and as you can see, the same thing that I've shown you before. Custom ID is here. This is going to be the method, and the same kind of record. And it would say request 2, request T, and 3, and likewise. Coding wise, it's really simple. All you have to do is just basically, to get started, you have to prepare your batch file in the same format as you have prepared before for fine tuning. JSON file in which each line is going to be a JSON or a dictionary, and each record doesn't need to be it doesn't need to basically have a comma at the end, right? Then basically, you upload these files to OpenAI server, and again, with this thing, you would end up in the same problem that I've mentioned before. Basically, if you have privacy concerns in which you cannot give your data to an external server or external company, in that case, this might not be a good solution for you. But nevertheless, this is how it works with OpenAI. You have to give your file to OpenAI. So this is how you submit the file, and then you create a batch in here. So as you can see, we are giving our input file ID, which we're going to get from here. Once this thing finishes, we will set up other things in here, the endpoint, completion window, and other things. And then once you do the batch, once you give it as a batch in here, once you submit it as a job, you're going to get this kind of dictionary, and you can always check the status. So obviously you won't be getting a response, you won't be getting a your job would not finish right away. So you can always go ahead and check the status. It would have any of these validating, in which it would validate the format of your file. If it fails, let's say for some reason you did not give a better data, or maybe there was some sort of error in parsing your data, then in that case the validation would fail. In progress would be when your obviously file would be doing the inference part. Finalizing would be when it's about to complete, obviously, and completed. Expired would be, here's the case: if your file fails, then in that case it would be sent to expired afterwards, and then it might be deleted. Your cancel job would be here. When it starts to cancel, it may take up to 10 minutes to cancel, and basically you would be when your job is canceled. This is what you see. To retrieve the results, you'll have to give the file ID that you would find in here. As you can see, this was the file ID when you submitted the job. So basically you would be getting that file ID. I believe that's the file, if I'm not wrong. Actually, it's this file. Yeah, it's not this was the ID for the batch that we gave, but this was the ID for the file. And you'll have to give the same file ID, and you can always find the file ID on the OpenAI's dashboard in here in Playground. And once you do that, you're going to get the same type of response. As you can see, this is the response, and I'm just going to explain this in a little bit, but let me finish the rest of the part, and then I'll explain you the format in here. You can always cancel the batch. You just have to give the ID, and then you can getting a list of all the batches. Basically you can see how many batches you have submitted before. These are all the models that are available. As you can see, all of these are text completion and text embedding models. Obviously you don't see DALL-E or any text to speech or any of those models because they are not supported for batch purpose. And as I've said before, you can also perform fine-tune models, and you can use your fine-tune models in the batch API as well. I've also talked about the rate limit. You can always you should have not more than 50,000 requests, and your file size should be less than 100 MB. And you can read more about tokens and stuff. It also has a limit of how many tokens are in the queue, and you can read more about that in here. it's important to understand the streaming API and the batch API, they have separate like servers or something. And because of that, if you use your regular batch, let's say if you use, let's say, streaming API and you use your limits, for example, then it's not going to affect your batch API. That's completely, it's completely going to be separate. And the same goes the other way as well, in which, if you have a batch API and if you have used that, then it's not going to affect, your streaming API. So, it's going to be completely different. And the last thing in here, as you can see, obviously the batches that do not complete in time, eventually they are moved to expired state. I've already talked about this. And yeah, unfinished, and they would be canceled, and basically they might be removed, right? But yeah, that's the case. With this thing, we came to the end of the theory part. In the next part, we are going to, submit a, a job in the, I have to log in actually, but we're going to submit a job in this thing, in the UI, in the console, and we will see this thing in action. But before we do that, actually, this last thing I forgot to explain to you guys, which was, so I already explained to you guys the format of the record, right? The record in which you would be giving. So let me just copy and show you guys once again the record. You can use, by the way, any JSON viewer to see, this thing, how it looks. And we have already talked about this. You'll have, the regular JSON in which you'll have these parameters. Then you'll have the body, messages, and other things like max token, temperature, and stuff. And messages would have all of your, messages, right? But I forgot to actually mention this thing. How do you get the response of each of them, right? So let's copy this and let me paste it here. Let's see. Okay, so as you can see, it would be a 1 second, what's the problem? Let's do it once again. Okay, let's start with this. Okay, so as you can see, it would be a, obviously a JSON in which you'll have the, batch request ID, and then the same ID that you give. So that this way you know which record from your input data does this thing belongs to. And here you'll have the response in which you'll have the status code, if the, if it was a successful run or not a successful run. And here in the body you'll have, some ID, what type of model was it, when was it created, and the model that you use. Choices would be, if you have requested only one output, then choices would be like, would only have one as an element. If you have requested like 3 or 4 output, or 3 or 4 like responses per prompt that you give, then in that case you'll see multiple things in here as well, right? And here you'll have the same thing. Index would be 0 because you did this is just the first element. Messages would have your messages and the whole thing that you gave, right? Role would be assistant, content would be whatever you gave, whatever was the answer, right? And in here you'll see how many tokens it used, and other things. Okay, so this is an assistant level response. So this would be a response to our previous question, which was say hello or something. It would be a response to our user level prompt. So in here you got the assistant level prompt back, which was just this. But yeah, there are lots of other things that are not that important. For example, I don't know, some of these IDs and some fingerprint and whatever they are giving. Those things are not important, but things like how many tokens were used, what was the message, like some other information here. These are some helpful information. So yeah, this is how you're going to get response in general from Batch API. And yeah, with this we came to the end. We are going to submit a job in the platform, in the next tutorial. And after that, we'll have 2 projects in where and they would be uploaded only on my Udemy course, not on my YouTube. But yeah, we'll be having 2 projects in which we would be doing Batch API, and we will be doing that using textual data, and then we would be doing that using images. So basically, we would be generating description of the images that we would be submitting for batch processing. So yeah, with this we came to the end of our tutorial, this tutorial. See you guys in the next tutorial. Thank you so much for watching. Have a good one.